A new drama is unfolding in the political theater. JD Vance, once a staunch critic of Donald Trump, is now forced to defend him, sparking a wave of sympathy and bewilderment. This turn of events is reminiscent of a lawyer defending a notorious figure. On air, a question was raised about a possible veto on a federal abortion ban. Vance had previously stated that Trump would veto such a law, but now he is evading a direct answer, citing the lack of personal discussion on this issue with the former president. Comedian Jimmy Kimmel didn't stand aside, showering Vance with criticism. Kimmel's witty remarks were so pointed that Vance might need a map to find the remnants of his reputation. Jimmy Kimmel, like a skilled surgeon, dissected the political metamorphoses of JD Vance, his deals with conscience, and his flirtations with MAGA. Each of the hosts' retorts hit the mark, exposing the hypocrisy carefully concealed by the politician. By the end of the monologue, only charred fragments remained of Vance's reputation. After his jab at Zelensky, Vance decided to mark the occasion with a trip to the Sugarbush ski resort. It's noteworthy that Sugarbush is also the Secret Service code name assigned to JD Vance himself. However, Vance may have erred in choosing a vacation spot, as he was met by hundreds of protesters in Vermont expressing their outrage. Don't miss the opportunity to subscribe to the channel and purchase exclusive Trump-themed merchandise, available for a limited time via the link in the description. JD Vance is a character so engrossed in the art of self-transformation that even the most skilled shapeshifters might envy his talent. In the political theater of masks and posturing, there are characters capable of breathtaking metamorphoses. They change guises with the ease of chameleons, demonstrating feats of acting worthy of the stage. At times, it seems that all their activity boils down to lazily rolling from side to side in search of the most advantageous position. Not so long ago, a certain JD seemed to have firmly established himself in the role of an intellectual cowboy from the heart of America. A Yale graduate and best-selling author, he fearlessly criticized Donald Trump with surgical precision. He was predicted to be the voice of reason, a conservative outsider unafraid to speak truth to power, a man who had maintained a connection with ordinary people. But now, a new star has risen on the political horizon, the heir to the MAGA movement, and it is none other than JD Vance. The transformation is striking, as if an actor capable of playing Don Jr. in a television movie was chosen for the role of vice president. And here we have the same person, but changed beyond recognition. Political transformation is sometimes a spectacle worthy of a comic book writer. Imagine a staunch Trump supporter appearing at Mar-a-Lago, adorned with all the trappings of his former allegiance. The metamorphosis is so striking that it deserves a separate story in the style of Marvel, eclipsing even Bruce Banner's transformation. The former president's recent remarks at the National Association of Black Journalists, where he noted that Vice President Harris suddenly became black, sparked a backlash. How did the father of 3 mixed-race children react to such an ambiguous comment? According to him, Trump's words did not cause him the slightest confusion. He explained that the president was merely stating the fact of Kamala Harris's chameleon-like behavior, who, speaking in Georgia, suddenly spoke with a southern accent, even though she grew up in Canada. In his opinion, she is trying to appear one of them to any audience, skillfully changing masks depending on the circumstances. Jimmy Kimmel, known for his sharp tongue, did not stay away from this political somersault. His comment undoubtedly added fuel to the discussion. So, it's time to take a close look at this chaos, because JD's metamorphoses are not just a change of political scenery. It's more like a desperate sell-off of principles, where self-respect is included as a bonus to a cheap deal. Kimmel, wasting no time, immediately poured fuel on this fire. This newly minted Trump ally, once the face of Maybelline, seems to take particular pleasure in having the audience boo journalists at his rallies. Perhaps this is his peculiar sense of humor. At a campaign event in Detroit, a reporter dared to ask him about those calls with Putin, and judging by the reaction, Vance sees absolutely no problem with this. As they say, it happens. Once, Vance branded Trump as a destructive force, a threat to democracy, and a person completely incompetent for the position he held. He was not shy about expressing himself, actively participating in the anti-Trump campaign. But apparently, at some point, he realized that without bowing before the king, he would not see the political Olympus. And suddenly, as if under the influence of a mind control beam, a complete transformation occurred. The slogan, "Make America Great Again," exposed the essence of political rhetoric, stripping it of its former intellectual gloss and moral high ground. The problem with Trump, according to many, lies not only in the numerous aspects of his policies but also in the fact that his message, addressed to the right wing and especially the white working class, seems anti-conservative and even anti-American. The essence of this message boils down to the fact that circumstances are so unfavorable that without Trump's presidency, no efforts can improve these people's lives. Such an approach seems erroneous and self-destructive. It's not just that the Republican base has some fundamental flaws unique to American political history. It's that Trump is an extremely unsuccessful candidate and, frankly, not the best person. Vance's transformation is the political equivalent of watching. In the political arena, there is a phenomenon where principles and beliefs are sacrificed for the sake of a sign of loyalty. Each such case painfully resonates in society, especially when it comes to famous personalities. JD Vance, once a voice of opposition, made a sharp turn, abandoning his former statements and joining the camp of Donald Trump. Vance's transformation looks almost symbolic. From an independent analyst, he turned into a person silently nodding in time with Trump's speeches. Even when he deviates from the topic, discusses audience sizes, or publishes impulsive messages at night. Vance's entire public persona now seems focused on supporting Trump, ready to express approval at the first request. The degree of Vance's devotion is surprising. Perhaps his forehead already bears an unspoken seal, confirming his belonging to Trump's political empire. Comedians and satirists don't even have to come up with jokes, or reality provides enough material for criticism. How can you so quickly turn from a critic into a flatterer without experiencing internal conflict? The answer is simple. Just betray your beliefs, pass it off as a strategic move, and hope that no one notices the substitution. In political circles, it did not escape attention how James David Vance, once a staunch critic of the political system, now increasingly resembles those very figures he ridiculed. This was especially evident in his close relationship with Donald Trump. From the outside, it looks like a desperate attempt to change one's own biography on the go, when all past actions and statements become obvious. Comedian Jimmy Kimmel did not miss the opportunity to emphasize this discrepancy. At a political event, Vance announced his desire to become vice president, calling for support and promising victory. However, his words sounded against the backdrop of criticism of the current president, who, according to him, prefers to relax on the beach in Delaware instead of working in the White House. Indeed, who in their right mind would prefer sleep to wakefulness, especially when it comes to public space? While one is immersed in the embrace of Morpheus, does Chairman Xi Jinping, the leader of China, allow himself to bask on the beach, indulging in sleep? Or does Kim Jong-un of North Korea, possessing a nuclear arsenal, spend time on a serene vacation? They are unlikely to afford such luxury. We should not forget the recent incident when Barack Hussein Obama seemed to subtly needle the current president. And this is not just a manifestation of double standards, but rather a carefully orchestrated performance. It is surprising how JD naively believes that his past statements and interviews have sunk into oblivion. But the World Wide Web remembers everything, JD, and so does Jimmy Kimmel. It is not surprising that this case attracted the attention of Jimmy Kimmel. What else remains to be done when a Yale graduate, a successful Silicon Valley investor, suddenly starts talking as if he grew up in a fishing and hunting store, was baptized in Bud Light beer, and raised on short Fox News stories? In such cases, there is only one thing left to do: publicly and mercilessly ridicule him. With merciless accuracy, Kimmel not only parried the attacks but organized an entire satirical attack, destroying JD's carefully constructed image live on the air. It seemed that the candidate decided that to win votes, it was enough to pretend to be a simple guy from the people, although he spent most of his life in offices. Kimmel, with an unerring sense of falsehood, instantly exposed this game of disguise. JD's new image sounded like a false note, like a fire siren. And although the author of the text is not a fan of Trump, he recognizes the elite's rightness regarding the former president. He emphasizes that he never was and never will be a Trumpist, considers him disgusting, and sees his policies as dangerous for the working class. Nevertheless, faced with the potential of a Trump victory, the author might have to hold their nose and vote for Hillary to prevent an even more undesirable outcome. She's not trying to impress. She's simply sharing information so that listeners can form their own opinions. And it inadvertently raises the question. Ultimately, doesn't it all boil down to subjective claims, to the age-old he said, she said? And who should one ultimately favor? Donald Trump, whose reputation for truthfulness is legitimately questionable, or a woman whose words are on record? Denial becomes a favored tactic. Kimmel didn't even have to exaggerate. He just voiced what everyone was already thinking. How does someone who's used to lattes in Silicon Valley coffee shops suddenly start acting like a long-lost member of the Duck Dynasty family? It's the political equivalent of a billionaire showing up in camouflage gear and pretending to be genuinely surprised by the automotive section in Walmart. Jimmy dug deeper, mocking JD Vance's sudden acquisition of a Southern accent, as if it were a free bonus included with every Trump rally. He lampooned how Vance, the author of a best-selling memoir, is now willing to stand behind a man he once criticized. Donald Trump seemed to look at the world with the same vacant stare that Vice President Mike Pence had bestowed upon the public throughout his entire term, as if he'd become a silent prop on the presidential stage. Every jab from host Jimmy Kimmel hit its mark, because the metamorphosis that JD Vance had undergone couldn't go unnoticed. It was as blatant as a neon sign, and Kimmel turned his late-night show into something resembling a clinical study, vividly demonstrating the signs of sellout behavior in real time. No concessions, no mitigating circumstances, just a ruthless surgical analysis that left Vance's reputation lying defeated on the studio floor. For the past few years, JD Vance has performed feats of mental gymnastics, trying to justify his dizzying somersault from Trump critic to ardent supporter and mouthpiece. This is the same person who once compared Trumpism to heroin addiction. And that's not an exaggeration. One only needs to look at his past statements. Now, he comes across as the most zealous and eager in turn on the campaign trail, ready to nod unquestioningly at every mumbled utterance from Trump, which seems to happen every 7 seconds. Is that really the truth? Because there is something deeply insincere about talking to world leaders. Is it really appropriate to negotiate with dictators seeking to destroy allies? The answer is a resounding no. It's as absurd as throwing a party to honor someone with a dubious reputation. This hypocrisy didn't go unnoticed and was mocked. JD Vance's political transformation is not an evolution, but rather a rapid descent. From the author of Hillbilly Elegy to an adherent of a specific political line, his metamorphosis seems as convincing as a fake designer watch. Every action he takes seems dictated by a desire to please, as if he's desperately trying to curry favor. It's such a humiliating capitulation that even seasoned politicians are urging him to retain at least a modicum of dignity. And when that was pointed out, it caused an uproar. After all, like many politicians, he sold his soul. As JD Vance delves deeper into the embrace of MAGA, there's a desperate attempt in his actions to appear genuine, authentic. At the same time, he readily takes on whatever form pleases Trump at any given moment. Today, he's a thoughtful writer from the Rust Belt, and tomorrow, he's a fervent conspiracy theorist about Hunter Biden's laptop, flashing across cable news channels and seemingly sending out an SOS in Morse code. The irony is that Vance's entire career has been built on presenting himself as the voice of the people. But the question arises, which people exactly? Those who, after reading his book Hillbilly Elegy, saw him as a wise savior of ordinary folks? Or those who chant "lock him up" at Trump rallies toward anyone who appears on MSNBC? Obviously, these two groups of people are unlikely to meet in the same Walmart. In the end, we are left with an empty shell imitating a human being. Perhaps the most discussed moment of the debate was Vance's unwillingness to acknowledge Trump's election loss. Notably, CNN unearthed an interview that Vance gave to Megyn Kelly back in November 2020. At that moment, a statement was made that can only be described as naive. It was asserted that there was no reason to expect violence or chaos, that after Biden's inauguration, the people would accept the election outcome, and further struggles would unfold on another field. Jimmy Kimmel didn't mince words, calling it nonsense. JD Vance appears as a figure full of contradictions, a paradox in a red tie. He positions himself as a defender of the common people, while having behind him a prestigious Stanford education and experience in tech investing in Silicon Valley. Vance speaks of the needs of the forgotten man, but spends a significant amount of time in the company of billionaires. It seems he has forgotten how recently he called Trump unfit for the presidency. And here we have a new role for JD Vance. He's trying to present himself as a translator of Trump speeches for the wider American public. The irony is that often even Trump himself doesn't seem to understand what he's saying. But Vance readily nods, interprets the president's words, and presents them as some ultimate truth. Imagine the situation. Donald Trump, an eccentric politician, declares that the moon is made of diet soda. What happens next? On Fox News, a certain JD appears, ready to explain the scientific underpinnings of such a bold statement. The essence is that JD seems to serve not his constituents, but influence. Trump, in his eyes, is a golden goose laying approval ratings with a taste of the Make America Great Again slogan. Therefore, JD says what they want to hear from him, votes as directed, and hopes that no one will remember his articles from 2 years ago titled, "Why Trump is the End of Western Civilization." Unfortunately for JD, the internet remembers everything. In 2020, he wasn't talking about stolen elections, but probably searching Google for best way 69 on a futon. This is what makes Kimmel's exposé particularly striking. It's not just that JD is changing his beliefs, but how shamelessly he does it. He doesn't even try to hide his hypocrisy, counting on voters being too caught up in cultural wars and gas prices to notice how their senator is imitating someone he once despised. Earlier, warnings were sounded regarding the metamorphoses occurring with JD Vance. Kimmel even made an ironic suggestion that such a radical change in his views deserves close attention from scientists looking for signs of political shapeshifting. Indeed, if Vance's trajectory of political beliefs were plotted on a graph, it would create a chaotic picture, resembling a drawing by a child overstimulated by caffeine. The paradox is that JD Vance, despite everything, strives to maintain the reputation of an intellectual. He's capable of discoursing on the crisis of masculinity and the decline of Western values, and then, just minutes later, praising Trump, comparing him almost to Moses, but with more sophisticated marketing. This intellectual exercise is akin to drinking Mountain Dew from a wine glass and pretentiously calling it an act of high culture. Notably, American media long ignored this eclecticism until Donald Trump and the author of the statement drew attention to it, starting to talk about cat memes. If memes can prompt American media to pay attention to the problems of the American people, then it becomes a perfectly justified tool. Observers note that Kamala Harris avoids scrutiny, while Jimmy Kimmel not only ridiculed JD Vance but also unmasked him. Behind the affected image of a best-selling author, a fake accent, and political maneuvers lies a man who has traded principles for proximity to power. A politician who naively believed that his sudden transformation would go unnoticed, like an unsuccessful influencer launching a podcast. And JD fell for it like so many others. Critics argue that you can rant and rave on Twitter all you want, but as soon as a late-night host dedicates a 5-minute monologue to you, you start complaining about the injustice and bias of late-night comedy. However, it's not about bias, but about a merciless roasting, where JD plays the role of the turkey. Vance's problem is not only that he changed his views, but that he denies his former beliefs, rewriting history like a deleted scene from a movie. The times when you could hide unsavory deeds are gone. Today, in the digital age, information is not only preserved, it is archived, copied, and made available at the most unexpected moment. And so, someone named JD, immersing himself in the political environment, increasingly evokes a sense of awkwardness. Every time he makes a public appearance, whether it's an interview, a social media post, or a comment on current issues, it feels like a clumsy attempt to imitate a well-known politician, as if he's participating in a radio parody contest. There's something almost tragic about it. Almost, because it's the logical result of abandoning one's own convictions to please public opinion. The vast majority of voters vote for leaders, not their deputies. But, Apparently, JD sincerely believes in his own importance, since he thinks the main requirement for a candidate is the ability to immediately take over the country in the event of unforeseen circumstances. And he's convinced that Donald Trump is confident in his abilities. It seems Vance truly believes he's right because for him, politics is just a game. And while Jimmy Kimmel showered him with ridicule on live television, Vance's supporters wasted no time raising the usual cry about cancel culture, while trying to cancel the comedian himself. The irony of the situation reached such proportions that even Elon Musk seemed envious and tried to acquire it. Now JD finds himself in an extremely difficult position, between who he once was and who he's trying to be now. And every time he tries to please everyone, vigilant late-night show hosts, like Kimmel, immediately drag out compromising videos, quotes, and killer jokes. The truth is that JD Vance is not a leader, but merely a rebranded product, a fake political figure created to please a focus group, wrapped in fashionable buzzwords about the culture war, and thrown into the Senate like a defective toy that keeps repeating the same thing. Trump was right when you pull the string. And, frankly, it's not even the betrayal that's most infuriating, but his smug look. He seems to be wandering in the shadows, hoping that the past has dissolved into the fog of oblivion, as if those 2016 interviews never happened, every word of which is captured on YouTube. As if no one read his hillbilly elegy, and then watched the author turn into the very thing he so vehemently denied. But Jimmy Kimmel's watchful eye noticed the falsehood, and the spark of satire ignited the truth. Like Trump, who once tasted the bitterness of ridicule, JD Vance is learning a harsh lesson. Comedy is truth's most faithful ally. And nothing exposes hypocrisy so mercilessly as a well-aimed punchline that strikes at the very core.